they know it. So I will let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Kwame, and then we go to Wanlov, and then talk about their work, art, music, and activism, and then we'll come back for a few more questions. Kwame.
I am Kwame Edu, also known as Kwame Write. I'm a storyteller. So my work comes in the form of text, and I make audio work also aside visual forms, and then I sometimes find myself curating and working with different media in experimental ways, and that is also the pathway of me finding sort of myself, or as an entity who can contribute to society and be of impact in certain ways. And but I come from a background of biochemistry from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and then so science also shapes my way of thinking and working and interactions, and I'm really passionate about community. I'm really passionate about um, spatial poetry. I'm passionate about connecting the dots and finding ways to make my social commentary connect to the facets of where I'm from. Yeah.
People know me as Wanlov the Kubolor. My government name is Emmanuel Osubonsu. I feel I do what I do because I've realized that for myself to be comfortable, everybody around me must be as comfortable as possible, or at least think that I am, or believe that I'm trying to make the world a more comfortable place for all of us. What I do through lyrics, music, and visuals, mostly in film. And yeah, I do it also to, in a way, to prove my worth, because like when you grow up between two worlds and neither of the worlds fully accept you on on your visual presence, or when like, to put it simple, when I'm in Romania, everybody in Romania thinks I'm from somewhere else. And when I'm in Ghana, everybody from Ghana thinks I'm from somewhere else. So subconsciously, you're always trying to prove that you belong where you are. And the best way to do that, or to be deemed worthy of being where you are, is to fight for everybody to be okay, so that people do not concentrate on marginalized or people who look otherly, because I feel like all those surface things only matter when they are imbalance of resources to be shared, that people start picking up on appearance, on shape, on ethnicity. And so I feel like my default is to make everybody comfortable by making those who are extremely comfortable right now uncomfortable. Yeah.
So so two things: so religion and homophobia, which in a way, so basically when I was studying Pentecostalism, I was spending almost every day of 1 year with the Church of Pentecost and several other charismatic churches. The way in which homophobia, it wasn't the way it is now, back then. So I'm talking about in the early 2000s. So yes, the church is inherently, the Pentecostal church is inherently homophobic, but it wasn't expressed violently. But since 2016 and since the cathedral, so this is also connected to religion, Christianity has become more nationalistic and also more homophobic. So I'm wondering why you choose to respond to Christianity through the cathedral, also why you choose to respond for you, Wanlov, through your work with Angel Maxine and through some of your other stuff, why you choose to respond to this inherently kind of violent homophobia. Like, what is it through your music that you're doing? Perhaps you can start, Kwame.
Yeah, so talk of the cathedral was inspired for my part by Kofi Awuno's poem. I met Kofi Awuno when I jumped the wall in Presec, Legon, 2014, to go perform poetry in University of Legon. Because we were writing poems and they would be published. We created a magazine in Presec called The Gazette, rebel type poems. And we didn't have a platform for performing, but we heard that in Legon. They are performing poetry. We wanted to try it out. So we would go there and then be part of the scene. And that's where I chanced on meeting the pioneer professor, Kofi Awuno. And that inspired me a lot. I actually I went online because those times we were browsing a lot, finding ways to get white people to send us magazines or things like that. And I chanced upon a poetry online platform and I submitted my poems, and then I was supposed to go to the US and I was bounced a visa. That broke my heart. I didn't write poems for years. So back to the cathedral. Kofi Awuno wrote a piece about a tree which was shedding incense on the infant corn. And so that tree, of course, was sort of nurturing what it was like, the generation and everything. So it's so if that tree is cut down, that's what deforestation, right? And so the tree is like for the whole community, and it is giving nutrients to what is growing underneath it, the people. And when the tree is cut down, it is being replaced. But who is going to cut it down? Is the surveyors and builders. And then it's being replaced by a huge, cathedral of doom. And this was like this decades ago. And then we find ourselves in the, in these times where they are promoting this cathedral to us. So as people who can connect the dots and say, oh, this poet said this, but it is really happening now. So that's what, pushed. And I contacted my big bro, Wanlov, like, this is what, it is. And he was already like speaking about it on Twitter and everything. So it made sense. Like, he wrote his piece in like 10 minutes and we were already collaborating. So that was a way to shed light on what it was. And I think moving from that, I became more and more interested in design, architecture, and what we use spaces for. I think the best way to find someone's character is how they share a space with you or not. And yeah, I would realize that in Makola, where my mom had a shop, um, and she was working with these ladies from the north who would come and work and then go back to the north and do farming and come back. So, but the fact that she had this shop, and in front of the shop, she would allow them to also set up small shops. You know, that's like our humanness in form of like sharing space, you know. So when a huge market built out of a westernized idea of architecture, like what is happening in Kejetia, when something is built like that and then they don't realize that the, you know, how we share space is different from just establishing, you know, linear shops and be like, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. You know, we come from a place where we share the space and break it down like, this is mine, but you can also set up here and here right in front of me, and we can all sell at the end of the day. So that, you know, shared form of architecture, so my interest has grown from writing the cathedral to photographing, you know, architectural forms around Ghana, and in a platform on Instagram I call Portals of Ghana, and archiving those photos and being like, okay, with time, there's a lot of gentrification, but it's also really soft, and it's like you can't place a finger on it, but there are some forms that we used to use that will no more be there in the next 10, 20, 30 years in terms of sharing space. Yeah.
When we were kids growing up, we experimented a lot. Um, okay, it wasn't unusual, and in some parts of Ghana still isn't, to see um, physical affection in the form of holding hands from what is deemed to be the same gender or same-sex people. And we were like, nothing came, you know, there was no kind of negative view of people holding hands, walking around, seeing their friends off home or whatever. It was when I got to America that I was received by a host family in Austin Bergstrom Airport in Texas. And the son, he was 15 years old, of my host family, Rusty Riley, the first thing he said to me before greeting me was, I heard in your country, y'all hold hands and walk around. In America, we don't do that gay stuff here. And I was a bit perplexed by what he had told me. And the only thing that around the time was a bit like, was a nomenclature or a naming that was otherly than what we were used to, was Kojo Besia. And that would be what appears to be a male that is behaving like what people that are women appear to behave like, right? So Kojo Besia was said with some kind of slight mockery, which I didn't understand why at the time. But then I came to understand that it was because of the machoism, what we call machoism, blow men, strong men, and so on and so forth. So to have mannerisms of a woman, our society had begun to look at as a weak thing. And I feel it was a gradual import from consuming a lot of Western patriarchal macho stories. And now, as you said, the homophobia is on a huge rise because apart from importing electronic waste, toxic waste, clothing, fast fashion waste, we are also importing homophobia, which has been banned in, or is somehow trying to be banned in a lot of these Western countries, you know. So specifically, our homophobia is pushed by the Western Congress of Families, something like that, from Texas. And they are behind a lot of these homophobic legislatures in like Hungary, Poland, maybe soon in Romania, Nigeria, Zimbabwe. And quite recently, because they haven't had much of an outlet for homophobia in the Western world, it's being dumped on us. And so people here are being paid, to push this agenda. And so we see that, and we found out some of these things. And so we are seeing how our lives are getting to be more dangerous than they already are. And so that is why, we are reacting to it the way we are. Like with this new bill, we are trying very hard to make Ghanaians aware of how all of us are in danger of such a bill being passed. Because to have a queer relative who you do not report can give you 5 years plus prison time. And so many things. I mean, we live in a country where the police can just stop you in the evening and just outright ask you for money and make up something about your car or anything like to do with the traffic regulations. And if just because you don't want them to waste your time, you give them something sometimes. And I can imagine such a bill being passed and how the police are going to use that. I mean, jokingly, I was saying that if there's a rainbow in the sky and you are looking at the rainbow, the police can arrest you based on that. Why are you looking at the rainbow? Are you part of the gayisms? And so I just see how dangerous it is. So apart from reacting and creating around it to ease some of the pressure, I'm also hoping somehow that we impact the trajectory of this evil bill. And because I saw firsthand how a lot of the queer community had to run into hiding when the safe space was raided a year or so ago. My sister and I had to host Angel Maxine in our space for a couple of days off and on because the traditional council from the town she comes from, were asking for her to be summoned to the town to be questioned by some chief, some king over there. So and it's very sad because like when you learn a little bit about African queer history, you know that the royal courts and those spaces were the places where most queer people, were most present because of duality, because of talent, because of culture, history, And so now the hostility is, of course, it's like a new colonial homophobia that we are dealing with. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just on the topic of that, just not to go too much.
So I have one last question before I open it up for Q&A. This goes, to go on from what you were saying. I think one thing I admire about both of you and your work is that it touches on a topic that not many Ghanaians, especially the civil society activist part of they don't talk about a colonialism as much as let's say, good governance or a corruption or a political leadership, but your work, you touch on the ongoing effects of colonialism, right? And how it hasn't just gone away because Ghana got independence. It hasn't gone away because you're now 60 plus years since, and so can you speak to two things? Firstly, how does your anti-colonial positioning affect or influence your activism and through your music? And do you think that what you do has any effect, or do you hope that it has effect on changing politics at all? It's not a simple question, but
Yeah, so my approach has been as much experimental as lived, and it starts from one point, and it's not like I'm going from point A to point B, which is the destination, but we could also as much start from the destination and question, throw more questions to more questions. So I've tried it with poetry. I've tried it with spoken word and recorded stuff with Yom, who's also a poet. We've done Countrymen. We've done a Skyscrapers Kiosk. And I've made music, social commentary music with Wanlov. We also have Colonial Cleanse, myself, Wanlov, and Mensa. And you realize how far it goes. It is amazing, it is reaching, it is a voice which is lasting, it's there for people to download. But I've realized we need to also look at diverse ways of making things happen. Because one thing is the people at the top, they don't care. And we all know that. So as much as David Ajay would go and follow me on portals of Ghana, maybe because he likes my pictures there, how would that, help him realize that maybe he should opt out of the cathedral he is, designing and working on? And we realized that right at Jamestown, from Jamestown to like the art center, they are going to scrape all that space off. There are so many talented artists out there. They will lose their jobs while they go to. They say they are going to give them a space in Dodoa or somewhere. And the fact that we can't coexist with art is what is traumatizing. Yeah, Akufo-Addo has a space in Nima, and as soon as he got in power, those kiosks which were like right in front of his building, he had to take it off and plant some green grass and pump water on it every day. And that is, these are some things which are really problematic. So for me, moving from the music, then I realized, okay, we need to also work with the kids. So I started extending my library, like the books I read, I started buying more and make it more like make it open, make it free. I grew up in Community 7, and my mom had a space which she used to sell groceries, and she moved from that, and then my sister was using it as a place for selling books, and she passed away to breast cancer. And after that, I wanted to extend that legacy and still put books there, make it free for kids in the community. So I named it Buzanga Books, and there's a place where we were most impactful in the COVID era, and they'll feel so safe and be there and read those books. And yeah, I don't only put kids literature. I try to make it more Black literature, and I don't only put kid stuff. I put like, things which would, trigger your mind to think in different ways. And, I love it when the kids will go into those sections of the library and, they can borrow the books, bring it back and things like that. So as much as I could keep a library for myself, I make it a community, book space. And yeah, from there, I started traveling around Ghana and acquiring land. I like some 10 years ago, I went somewhere in the north and bought 2 plots of land, very cheap. And yeah, after some time, I realized I was so inspired to see Ibrahim set up SCCA. So I went back to Tamale, and then I was really interested about weaving. So I established a place where young ones can come and learn how to weave. And then I would get, because we have several types of weaving in Ghana. There's the Ewekete type, there's the Kente, but there's also Gonja type. There's, several different forms. There's the Edinkra Kente and things. So we're trying to experiment how we can evolve the traditional forms of weaving to maximize, like to create different expressive forms. And so that is like a platform to avail creative interactivity, move from the normal educative forms, which are not really helping, because we feel art speaks to a lot of issues, but it also enables a new way of thinking.
I don't think there's any way, if you're an artist whose art reflects society or speaks to society in some form, that you can exist in Ghana, which is still very much a colonial creation, without addressing, colonialism, which then will make your art anti-colonial, because I think I feel almost everything. No, I feel everything colonial has a super negative impact on our reality. One of the most simple things, such as pedestrian culture, we have inherited this colonial notion that a vehicle has more value than a human being. So the way a motorist will honk or threaten, use body language of the car to intimidate pedestrians, or even to where when a pedestrian is hit by a car, you will quite often see people check for the damage of the car before the human being. And I feel that's very colonial. I think it comes from the time where Europeans would be driving or horsing through the town, and the indigenous people to the space have to scurry out of the way of these vehicles, of these people. I think it's almost the same thing still going on. Also walls around houses are super colonial. I think that comes from us beginning to Stockholm syndromize the forts, the forts littered around the coast of the country, along the coast. We felt we also have to fortify our space in that sense, because I think when you look at many cultures around the world that have not had their evolution interrupted, you hardly see any walls around the houses. When you go around towns in Denmark and some places in South America and so on, you won't see walls. You see tiny fences around houses, and I feel like these walls it's like everybody fortifying their space, like just basically copying the architectural structures of forts, and feeling like somebody's going to jump over the wall. The way we put glass, barbed wire, it's almost like a multi-complex of minute prisons littered all over the country, you know, especially with these barbed wires and stuff. So, and then 6 March, like, I feel like 6 March is us celebrating the fact that we were colonized more than, because if we were truly independent or felt we were striving for independence, we would have long done what was recently done by, I think, a president of some African country. She just, Tanzania. Yeah, they just decided, instead of spending about $500,000 on an independence celebration, they would build hospitals or schools, yeah. And so, I mean, instead of building schools on 6 March, we bring students out there to stand in the sun and give, and the ones who faint, we don't even check if they are lactose intolerant, and we buy condensed milk and make them drink it and continue standing in the sun. I feel it's all those things are super colonial. Also, the extraction of oil, the extraction of gold, the way it's being done by companies like Newmont and and all the Galamsey companies and so on and so forth. Like, just what's happening in Atawa Forest, all that is colonialism, you know. It's just upgraded, and so the destruction of the land, the destruction is goes hand in hand with what colonialism was and still is. And so it will appear in your work if you are for your place, for the land, for the people. And of course, the borders. What are we talking about? The borders around the country. It's crazy. I mean, this concept of borders is so crazy to me, especially now that we've driven around through Europe, which is a European Union now, and you're just crossing, you're just driving. You don't know what country you're even in unless you look at some signboards, you know. And here, the borders are so tight between the countries, especially by land, you know. And so that is also something that we hope is done away with, you know. And so that is what is, I mean, there's so many elements. Air condition.
My question is more of, you both seem very interested in other people's well-being and so on and so forth, but how do you personally deal with some of these stresses and all these problems, like on a personal level? Does it get to you? And if so, are there communities that you like work with to deal with them, or do you do it individually? Would you like to share on that level? How do you deal with these pressures yourself? Especially when you are talking to people who don't seem to want to listen to what you're saying, who actually see you as weird, even though what you're saying is steeped in logic. How do you deal with that kind of thing? Yeah, thank you.
I've come to a place in my artistry where the creation or the reaction to these various things in society that stress me and I see stressing others around me. When I create, when I'm writing, when I'm recording, mixing, editing, and seeing that resistance or that reaction come out of me, that is what, it heals me at the same time. That's how I feel. Like, I feel refreshed. Like, by the time I'm done recording the song, it's almost like you've gone to meet a friend, you have some problem on your mind, and you've spoken about the problem, and the weight feels lighter just because you've spoken about it. So for me, that is what the creative process does for me. And if it did not do that, I would have stopped creating a long time ago, because I'm not yet in that position where my creativity is bringing me like uncountable resources, you know. So it is something that I would have, even if I was making a lot of money from it at the moment, I would have had to pay for some kind of therapy if it itself was not therapeutic to me.
Yeah, so personally, it's the kids for me. Like, I have two daughters who um, have really like shifted how I think um, and work basically just by being there and present. But also the fact that, as Wanlov said, like he's mixing, editing, doing this and that. Um, the fact that I can work with different forms, um, but I'm not looking at being like the best at this or the best at this or that. It's for me experimental as much as um, I can be involved in contributing with like my own language, right? So, so the fact that I can write a poem and then I can maybe pick a camera and do something or like I have some farms around Ghana, like I can go and work with the soil and stuff like that. It's a breath of fresh air to move away from the chaos because it will get to you one way or the other. As much as you might not feel it. It sometimes takes some time and it hits you that there is like persistent trauma which is living inside your bones. So we try to shift from that and work with different forms in different spaces and with people, like interaction with people, and then the kids. The kids are really, really important.
And you both kind of alluded to this in your own way, but the kind of negative reactions to some of the work that you've done. And Bright and our other fellow cartoonist here also alluded to the same thing, these kind of threats, either explicit or otherwise. I think a lot of artists in these political scenes would kind of seen that almost as a kind of success because of the way that, fear begets violence, and negative reactions to his work means that you're eliciting some sort of fear in somebody who thinks that your work is threatening them in one way. But perhaps your goals with the kind of work that you do, all of you guys, is not necessarily to elicit fear in the hearts of the subjects, but something else. And so I'm curious as to this kind of politically motivated work, political for lack of a better term. Is the goal a type of self-expression, or is it a public education, or are you trying to elicit some sort of concrete action? And if the latter, what action is that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things at once. It's a social commentary. We're trying to get in connection with the grassroots and sort of have like a two-way voice, you see, because there's already a voice on the ground, and then you are the artist who, you're not funded or anything, but you create a platform or jump on one, and and then you stir up things. So, like Mutombo's podcast, for instance, or Poetress Tamped Press, or Black Girls Glow, or Akosia's Moon Girls. It's a constant or consistent effort to ask questions and to engage and to collaborate and to be a voice. The concrete effort will be like being part of building institutions like Golda. They built a school, I think it's in Crawford or somewhere, like things like that. So those institutions would sort of carry your work on after you're dead. Yeah. Sorry for being so dark.
Yeah, Cooper. So I think beyond, because I've mentioned a few times now that just the creation is cathartic for me, and I've come to be satisfied, or maybe I'm lying to myself, but I feel I am totally fine with just dwelling in the creative process and not really monitoring what happens after I put out anything, because I've seen our predecessors and how they dwelled on the dreams they had for society, and how society always fails them or fails people who fight for society. And so I am not going to repeat that. I'm not here to kill myself or anyone who would sell me out in a second. And so, again, there are, yes, tiny secret hopes here and there, or excitements. When I heard Mutombo was booing the president, I was super excited and I wished I was there, you know? And somehow I feel like, no, I'm sure, like, all the things that's going around and the discussions we've had, some things have bubbled up in Mutombo, and he couldn't help it that day but to boo. And so, yes, I do revel in some small victories here and there that may or may not be the result of the work that we do. But again, I'm not going to give more than a tithe offering to that. 90% is for me in my room, in my studio.
To join me in thanking both our panelists, Wanlov and Kwame. It's been an amazing conversation.